At this point, you should understand how to find a given coordinate on the field. What we need to do now is learn how to use that coordinate grid to subdivide the space between two coordinates. As I mentioned before, our final goal is to be able to use our awareness of the field markings to make that motion between each set as even and as consistent as possible. Let's say you're moving between these coordinates. On the side to 40-yard line, 2 in front of the back sideline hash, and on the side to 45-yard line, 8 in front of the back sideline hash. As before, let's begin by rewriting these in shorter form. We'll set the top of the screen as the front of the field, and we'll go ahead and plot each of these coordinates. In the first set, we just need to find the 40-yard line, and then we'll mark off our 2 steps in front of the back hash. In the second set, we find the side to 45, and then step off our 8 from the back hash. Remember, this is just 2 steps from the center X, and we always want to measure our coordinates from the nearest possible landmark. Now that we have both coordinates plotted, let's imagine the straight line path that connects them. In order to help us move evenly from the first coordinate to the second, we're going to visually subdivide that space. Sometimes we may subdivide a phrase into 3 segments, 4 segments, and sometimes it may even be useful to know our location on every single count of the move. But since we're just beginning to cover midsets, we're going to keep it simple, and we're only going to subdivide the phrase in half. In other words, we just want to find the halfway point between these 2 coordinates. We'll do this in 2 parts. Once for the left to right component of our midset, and again for the front to back part. Left to right, we need to know the total distance that we cover. And here, it's easy to see that we cover 8 steps. Now, divide that in half, and we get 4. And if we start at either end of the move and travel 4 steps left to right, we should land at our left to right midset. And we're going to go ahead and write that as 4 outside the 45. Just keep in mind we could also write that as 4 inside the 40. They're exactly the same thing. Front to back, we're going to follow the same procedure. We start with the total distance, which in this case is 6 steps, and we divide it by 2 to get 3 steps. Now if we locate the place that's 3 steps from each of our endpoints, we land on our front to back midset. In this case, that midset is 5 in front of the back hash. So in the end, the midpoint of our phrase is 4 outside the 45 and 5 in front of the back hash. Okay, let's try another one. This time we're going to start 1 outside the side to 40-yard line and 3 behind the front sideline hash. We're going to end up 3 outside the 50 on side 1 and 7 in front of the front sideline hash. We'll condense both of those down to something that looks a little simpler. We'll set the top of the screen as the front of the field and then plot each of our coordinates. Here's our starting point, 1 outside the 40 and 3 behind the hash. And here's our end point, 3 outside the 50 on side 1 and 7 in front of the front hash. Once they're plotted, we can visualize the straight line path that we're going to take as we move from the first coordinate to the second. In order to find the midpoint of this phrase, we need to figure out a left to right midset and a front to back midset. The total left to right distance that we cover is 20 steps. We divide that in half and get 10 steps. And if we start at either end point of the phrase and move 10 steps left to right, we should land on that left to right midset. In this case, that left to right is 1 inside the 45, side 1. Our total front to back distance is 10 steps. Half of that is 5 steps. And when we move 5 steps front to back from either end of the phrase, we can see that our front to back midset is 2 steps in front of the front hash. So our full coordinate, the final midset, is 1 inside the 45, side 1, and 2 in front of the front hash. Okay, let's go over one more. This time we'll start 1.5 inside the side 145-yard line, 7.5 in front of the front sideline hash. And we're going to end up 1 inside the side 240 and 4.5 behind the front sideline. Let's start by rewriting the coordinates. And again, remember, the front sideline is at the top of the screen. Also, as we zoom in, you're going to see this light gray line that I've used to indicate the spot that's 16 steps from the front sideline. During this move, we're going to be crossing over this line since we start in a dot that's related to the front hash, and by the end of the move, we're relating to the front sideline. So when we go to figure out our front to back midset, that total front to back distance, it may be helpful to be able to see where this 16 steps is at. In any case, let's go ahead and plot our coordinates. Here's our first one, 1.5 inside the 45 side 1 and 7.5 in front of the front hash. And we're ending up 1 inside the 40 side 2, 4.5 behind the front sideline. Now, let's draw the pathway between them and start by figuring out our left to right midset. Our total left to right distance in this move is 21.5 steps. And if we divide that in half, we should get 10.75. So if we trace back 10.75 left to right steps from either of the endpoints, we're going to land 3.75 inside the 45 side 1, which is our left to right midset. Now, feel free to rewind and count that as carefully as you need to. This is the first set we've done that's requiring you to do math that involves half and quarter steps. You're going to see that pretty frequently throughout the season. Front to back, we cover a total distance of 20 steps. Half of that is just 10 steps. And now we can count really carefully from either endpoint. And you want to pay a close attention here to where you cross that 16 mark that we indicated earlier. This midset front to back should end up 14.5 behind the front sideline. A quick check with your field reference sheet and you'll see that 14.5 is also the top of the NCAA numbers. So, our midset falls at 3.75 inside the 45 side 1 and 14.5 behind that front sideline, otherwise known as the top of the NCAA numbers.